should there be a special exception to get Herta the super license, and could all this noise throw him off his game these last two IndyCar races?
Well, considering IndyCar is sort of should be considered level with Formula One, I don't see why the super license points should be in, especially as Formula One seems to be a feeder series into IndyCar as well for their drivers anyway. So the super license points came in to stop 17-year-olds driving in Formula One, akin to Max Verstappen, who came in at the age of 17. Everyone kicked up a fuss. So now it says, okay, you've got to be 18 and over and get all these super license points and championships to prove you're ready enough for Formula One. Colton Herta, you're seeing his stats there. Look, he's a 7-time winner in IndyCar. He's had 11 podiums. He's had 9 pole positions. He is very much capable driver. And I think he's ready for Formula One. I think he should be in Formula One. And you mentioned as well this whole thing. We'll get into it tomorrow in the wrap-up show as well, where we get to the F1 segment, because of especially what Yuki Tsunoda did today, stopping on the track twice, trying to cause a safety car. I think that was a key thing as well. It stank a little bit to me, to be fair, of another trying to cause a safety car, a bit of Crashgate situation in there as well. And the FIA are investigating all aspects of that Tsunoda incident as well. So we could be in long into the night to bring you updates on that as well. But I think that was very much what Tsunoda did today. It was about the contracts as well, because there's now a lot of drivers swimming around the AlphaTauri seats. If Gasly stays at AlphaTauri, it'll be Colton Herta alongside him in 2023. If Gasly goes to Alpine, Herta will still be with the team, but the second seat opens up. Now, is that Yuki Tsunoda or is that Mick Schumacher? We already know that Helmut Marko said that Schumacher is not one of us, but he said the same thing about Sergio Perez. And he also assured us that Alexander Albon would be racing with the team in 2021. Over the winter break, in comes Sergio Perez as well after his win in Shakir. So do not take anything Helmut Marko has to say with any truth at all. My prediction is that it will be Herta and Schumacher at AlphaTauri next year, even though Tsunoda may have stopped on the track today to get a safety car so that Max had a pit stop to not defend from Hamilton but defend from Leclerc, who was coming up quicker. I think that's still not going to help him out there as well. And Adenlai says, I don't like the exemption. Sean Galal will enter the chat room for F1 exemption. Sean Galal caused a lot more accidents than Colton Herta has, I can tell you that right now as well. Anyway, I'll let Ben answer the question as well, because I've rambled a bit too much about that. It's got me today, that Tsunoda thing. It was too dangerous.
Well, and Josh, I got to be careful not to ramble too, and I've got to make sure I try to stay objective here because, I'm an American who largely got into Formula One because Alexander Rossi made his 5 starts with Manor in 2015, and that's the one thing that's been missing with this, amazing boom that the sport has been experiencing here in the States. The one thing that we still need is an American driver representing the country on the grid. And Colton Herta, I think, is one of the best candidates, probably one of the best 2 candidates, along with Logan Sargent. Day of a Life says, I don't like the exemption because, then everybody's going to ask for one. But I think, there needs to be a medium between what the FIA have. And I know we were just discussing this on the Encore show a couple of weeks ago with NASCAR maybe being a little bit too lenient. I think drivers should largely be considered on a case-by-case basis, maybe have some sort of point system in place to make sure we're not allowing nobodies a chance to just buy a spot on the F1 grid without proving themselves first. But it's an absolute crime how few super license points IndyCar drivers are given relative to Formula 2 drivers. Now, I don't want to take anything away from Formula 2 or from Logan Sargent. It's one step below F1. It's the proving grounds. The champion, I believe, should, in a perfect world, have a spot on the F1 grid waiting for them, the next season. And we'll see what happens here with who seems to be the champion-elect. Felipe Drugovich. I know Josh will talk a little bit about that tomorrow as well on the Encore show when we get to that side of things. But it just makes very little sense to me that when you consider who you're racing in Formula 2, you're racing teenagers and early 20-somethings who are all trying to do the same thing, trying to prove themselves, trying to get a seat in Formula 1 that don't have nearly as much experience as veterans in other series around the world. And they're getting more super license points than an IndyCar driver is who has to race against the likes of Scott Dixon and Will Power and Joseph Newgarden and other Indy 500 champions and other IndyCar Series veterans and other IndyCar Series champions. I would make the case it's actually more impressive to finish 5th or even 7th or 8th in the IndyCar Series in the final point standings there than it is to finish 3rd in the final point standings in Formula 2. And again, that's not a knock on Logan Sargent. Logan Sargent is on the path that he's on. I think Logan Sargent, in a perfect world, would be a suitable candidate for the Williams seat next year, but there is that pesky thing called funding and sponsorship, and I think Latifi brings a lot more of that than Sargent does. But in the case of Colton Herta, I think it's an absolute crime that he doesn't have more super license points than he has based on where he's been ranked in the IndyCar points at the end of the last few seasons. I think the FIA need to totally revamp the system. IndyCar drivers all across the board should be given more points relative to where they finish in the standings, and they should make an exception for Colton Herta to be on the grid next year if a seat is offered to him in order to reflect those changes and in kind of a backtracking way, so to speak, because Herta, if the FIA do go ahead and revamp the point system, would have been given enough points to be granted a super license. But I think that's ultimately what it comes down to here. You know, the FIA, when they're talking about Formula One, I think they're a little bit too strict. You can make the case NASCAR's too lenient, but at the end of the day, I think everybody should be really, when it comes down to it, evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And in the case of Colton Herta, I think it's indisputable. He has the talent, he has the drive, and the level necessary to compete in Formula One.
Will Buxton must be watching our program because he's put a tweet out as well. So this is Will Buxton's take on things as well, because it's actually lined up perfectly what we're talking about. He says, worth remembering, special exemptions have been granted before for super licenses. There is precedent. The easiest solution, would be for the FIA to let Herta's Indy Lights season count for full points, and AlphaTauri run him at Abu Dhabi this year. And the precedence he's given is Yamamoto was given special exception for the Suzuka practice run back in 2019 as well. So Yamamoto, he was racing in Super Formula at the time, didn't have enough super license points. FIA gave him a waiver and he was allowed to compete in the practice. Now, it's been done before, and I hope as well they know that, because Colton Herta should definitely be in Formula One.
I would say let the guy run FP1 at Abu Dhabi, and if he looks as good as he did in the McLaren not too long ago, I don't think there's any argument that you can justify keeping him out of his seat if AlphaTauri wants to offer him a drive. I think he's proven himself. The only thing that he doesn't have is enough boxes ticked off of his resume for a super license. That's probably too difficult to get in the IndyCar series in the first place.
I think at the very least, you need to have the IndyCar series receive the same amount of points counted towards super license as FIA Formula 2. I think actually IndyCar should be rated above Formula 2, but I don't expect that they want to do that, obviously, because F2 is right under F1, so I don't think they're going to do that. But I think at the very least that IndyCar should be on the exact same level to receive the same amount of points, because that's exactly what type of championship IndyCar is. It's one of the premier racing championships.
If Chase Elliott wins the NASCAR Cup Series championship this year, I believe he has 37 super license points going back to first place and fourth place the last 2 years in the Cup Series. So Chase Elliott could have more super license points driving in NASCAR than Colton Herta would have driving in IndyCar. Now, again, no disrespect to Chase Elliott, but a predominantly oval series where nobody driving in NASCAR is there as a stepping stone for Formula One. And you're telling me Chase Elliott could be closer to Formula One than Colton Herta based on this system that we have in place? I mean, if that doesn't tell you that the system is broken, and not to mention the fact that NASCAR's championship comes down to a final race playoff where you can have a dominant season and not be first in points or fourth or whatever the case may be, it's a lot more random and rigged for entertainment on that side of things. Chase Elliott's closer than Colton Herta. I have a very big problem with that.
I think we all do, and your math is correct.